Welcome to another one of my Toyota Coaster project video. We're going to be installing an Android radio on the Toyota Coaster motorhome. We're going to be installing this radio here. This is a regular Android radio, and these radios run on 12 volts and the bus system is 24 volts. So we're going to use some relays and a voltage regulator to fix that. We're going to begin by explaining how the wiring is done for the radio. So here we've got the radio's main plug. So this is the main plug. This plug has 16 wires and not all of them will be used in this bus, and I'll explain why in a second. So you've got all your accessories and speaker wires here, and these two thicker ones are your power supply. Not all cars are the same. So this car's got only a pair of speakers instead of 4. Most commonly your car would most probably have 4 speakers, front and rear, whereas this one only has front speakers. I have separated the wires we're not going to be using, and these include the rear speaker channel, which happens to be these 4 wires here, the 2 purple and 2 green. These supply the rear speakers, which this car does not have, so we're not going to be using those. And the other 2 wires we have here are labeled key 1 and key 2. What these 2 wires do are, their primary job is to receive signals from buttons on the steering wheel, which this car doesn't have either. And most cars won't have it if you're installing this radio in a regular car. But if your car does have it and you can run wires from the steering column out into the radio, you can use these 2 wires to turn up and down the volume or skip channels, or you can program them the way you like in the radio. And this blue wire over here is for your power antenna, which this car doesn't have either, so that's also unused. So we're going to move on to the wires that we will be using. Now with these out the way, we can move on to the ones we are going to be using. So here we've got these 4 wires with the blue plugs on them. These are your speaker wires. The whites are your left speakers, and the 2 grey wires are your right speakers. So the way you can tell them apart is one's got a black stripe on it and one's just plain. The one with the black stripe on it is the negative terminal of the speaker, and the plain one would be the positive terminal of the speaker. So you have your 2 channels, the positive and negative, for left and right speakers. And moving on, we've got these 2 wires. One is labeled back. This is for the reverse camera, which I'll explain in a bit. And this one's for the illumination. This dims your lights at night with your parking lights. And finally we've got the power supply cables. Here we've got this yellow cable. This is your direct power supply, and this is your ground. This red wire feeds from your ignition from the accessory switch. So what this does is it turns on and off your radio when you turn the key. Now, because this car is a diesel, it has a 24 volt system, because the starter requires a lot more power to turn the engine due to the higher compression. So the whole system of the car happens to be 24 volts, and this radio runs on 12, which is the more common option. Therefore, we're going to be using this power converter here that knocks off the 24 volts and turns it into 12 basically. So that is wired directly into your positive and your negative, whereas this wire here needs to turn on with the ignition. Therefore we're using a relay, which is back here at the moment, and I'll explain how that works in a second. Due to all the wiring needing the 12 volt signals, we're going to have to do a few relays where you can use resistors as well, but I just happen to have a couple of relays laying around at the moment, so that's what I'm going to be using. Here I've got a relay with a diagram on it where I'll be explaining how the relay is going to be used. This one happens to be a 5-pin relay. The 5th pin is not going to be used, so we're going to focus on the other 4. So the way this works is it's got on one side an electromagnetic coil, and on the other side a metal plate with a gap in between. This acts as basically a switch, and when you supply positive and negative power to the electromagnetic coil, it pulls that metal strip, joins the circuit, and basically does the same thing as turning on a switch. So in our case, we're going to supply the electromagnetic coil 24 volts, because this happens to be a 24 volt relay, and the other circuit's going to have your illumination light going through it and the accessories in separate relays. And now I'll be showing you how to plug in the speakers. Because this car is a Toyota, you'll probably find that most Toyotas will have the same color radio wires, so I'll show you which ones go where. Let's start with this one here. This is the plain white wire, which is the positive left speaker wire. In the Toyota color codes, the wire for the left positive is a pink wire, which is the one right here, this pink wire here. So you're going to plug in the white into the pink. And here we've got the plain grey wire. This wire happens to have a green wire on the car end, so it plugs into the green one here. And now for the white one with the stripe, which is the left negative. This one goes with the purple wire on this end, and the grey one with a black stripe goes with the blue wire, and that's the right side negative. These speaker wires are powered by a built-in amplifier within the radio. If you want to run a more high-end audio system, you'd be using these audio outputs, which output to an amplifier, external amplifier, which powers your speakers. These two here are your left and your right channel for the audio outputs. In this coaster, we're only running a very simple audio system with two speakers, and we're going to be using the built-in amplifier with the radio. Now with the main plug done, I'm going to go ahead and explain the rest of the wiring in detail. So we just went through the left and right audio outputs, and this blue wire here labeled amp control, this is your control wire for your amplifier if you're running an external amplifier. What this does is it basically tells the amplifier when to turn on and when to turn off with the car. And the rest of the wires here are auxiliary inputs and outputs, and video input and video output. We're not going to be using any of these. And moving on to the other wires here, you've got two USB inputs. These ones go to these USB cables with an input port. What you can do with these is charge your phone off them. They're not great, they're very slow charging, but they can charge your phone. That's not their main purpose. These are for running a flash drive and transferring data in and out of the Android head unit. And this small plug on the end is for your reverse camera input wire. These two blue wires next to it are your Wi-Fi antennas. And this thick black wire is your main antenna, which should already be in your car with your existing radio. That basically just plugs in. And here is your GPS antenna. Now this one has to have a wire running through the dash and somewhere in the open so it can receive signals. And this is where I have mine. And this is basically everything on the back of the radio. And you've got your radio fuse here at the back, like most radios have. Now I'm going to quickly run through the wiring from this step-down adapter through the relay. So here is our relay, and we've got the 4 wires plugged in. This is the wire going to the radio. This is basically the 12-volt output. The white wire is the continuous 12-volt, which is basically a continuous 12-volt feed from the converter that runs the 24-volt down to 12. And here on the left we've got our ground wire, which is going straight to ground. On the right we have the 24-volt positive feed, which turns on when you switch on your key, makes the relay work, connects the internal circuit in the relay, and feeds 12-volt from the plug behind this one, which is the continuous, and that's what powers on your radio. Here I've got another relay, and this one's going to be used for the illumination. It's going to be wired up in the exact same way this one is, except for the trigger wire. It's going to be, instead of when you switch on your key, it's going to be when you switch on your parking lights. The wire you're looking for on the Toyota harness would be this green wire, and this is your illumination signal wire. This turns on with your parking lights. I'll demonstrate that in a second. I've got my tester here, which I'll wire up into that wire, and I'll switch on the parking lights and show you what happens. I have the tester up here, and here's the parking light switch. We're going to go ahead and turn that on. And as you can see, we're getting around 24 volts out of that wire. Now we use a relay to step down the 24 volt signal into a 12 volt signal for the radio's illumination. So this orange wire here is the radio's illumination signal feed. This is going to be fed by the relay, and the green wire there is the cast signal, which is going to be used to trigger the relay. I'm going to start off by extending both of these so they can reach where I'm going to mount the relay. Here's the two wires extended and plugs crimped on the end of them. So the next step is going to be to splice into the 12 volt feed, which comes from our regulator down here, and make a little ground cable to ground the relay. Here we've got the 4 wires for the illumination relay. I've spliced into the 12 volt supply and the ground, so we've got all 4 now and it's ready to plug into the relay. So here we've got the relay, and the green wire from the car, which is the illumination supply, the 24 volt one, will go on pin 85 on this relay. And for the orange wire from the radio, that's going to go on pin 30 here. The pin opposite the 24 volt supply is the ground, and this last pin here is going to be from the 12 volt supply. The middle pin is not going to be used, it's basically just connected to the this pin, the pin 87, so they're the same pin, so either one will work, but we're going to be using only one of the two. Here's the relay all wired in, and I just realized that this relay happens to have a built-in diode, so it's polarity sensitive. In this case, pin 85 is the ground and 86 is the 24 volt supply. Now with the wiring all sorted, now it's time to mount the radio, but before we mount it, we're going to turn on the key and check that everything works. And yep, that's working as it should. And now for the illumination, we're going to put on the parking lights, and the lights of the radio come on with the parking light, so that's all perfect. And what this radio does, it dims the screen with the parking lights as well, so it doesn't blind you at night. The existing radio in this car was larger than this Android one, so I had to create this blanking plate to fill in the gap under the radio. As far as the mounting goes, I've already taken my measurements. So these brackets go on the highest notch, so the bracket's down all the way basically. And this screw up here corresponds with the second slot, same on the other side. And that gets the height perfect, so it fits in there. What I'm going to need to do is put some extra material under here and a longer screw to push the radio a bit more further out, so it's flush with the blanking plate and the rest of the trim. The bottom mount of the radio, of the original car's radio, is all the way back here, so I had to put in this piece of wood to have 2 mounting spots that are level in front of each other, because the bracket on the new radio is basically just flat. And finally, we're done with the whole installation. I've put back the trim in place and everything's working as it should. And as you can see, if I switch on the parking light, dims the lights of the radio. So let me get the camera in focus. And it turns on the accessory lights on this side. You can't really see them, it's very sunny at the moment, but they do turn on with the parking lights. So thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe to my channel, and soon I'll make a video about why I use these Android radios and what's so good about them. Thank you.